Okay, let me unmute myself. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the February BSC meeting. I hope everybody had a great Valentine's Day. I hope nobody got 17 inches of snow. So we're all safe and sound, and let's get going. We've got a lot going on, a lot of things on the agenda today. That I think will take some discussion. We're going to try to rock and roll through some of the boilerplate activities so that we can get into some discussion points. So, Kara, did you want to take a roll call? Have you done that already?
We just did that, so we're good to go.
Okay, good. Recognition of guests. We have several guests on board. Seeing most of the BSC members came in kind of late. Tara, can you do the roll call of the guests just real quickly?
Yeah, happy to let you all know that we have Natalie Rupert from the Kenton County Public Library, Lisa Mulcahy, who gives our standing update about GROW NKWIB, Eric Owsley from the Career Center, he's the lead for business services. We also have Ellen Bates, who's our lead for all direct services, and Corey Eimer, who is the operator of KCC. And we have several WIB staff, Katie Jo Kirkpatrick, David Klockner, Connie Madden. I'm sorry if I've left anybody out, but I think that's everyone.
Okay, great, thanks. Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining as a guest. Looking forward to your input. At this point, anybody that needs to self-identify that has a potential conflict of interest on any issue? All right, great. Sounds like everybody's ready to rock and roll. So first order of business will be to approve the minutes from.
Hey, Dave, I'm sorry, it's Vicki. Can I go back? I might have a conflict of interest with the industry certifications discussion. I'd just like to go on record as that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Vicki. Anybody else having second thoughts? Okay, great. So we'll go forward to approving the meeting minutes from the last meeting. Pretty comprehensive meeting minutes from Connie Madden, so tip of the hat for that. So can I get a motion to accept these minutes?
I can make that motion.
Okay, great. Any, well, second, please.
I'm unmuted. I'll second.
Okay, great. Any questions or comments about the meeting minutes? Okay, if not, all in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Was that an opposed from anybody? Okay, great. Thanks. Meeting notes are approved. Next online, we have Corey Emmer talking a little bit about the programming and the Career Center activities. Corey, there you are. You want to go ahead and get started?
Sure, thanks, Dave. David Klockner, do you happen to have the slide available?
I just made him the co-host, so
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so yes, I can see it. Thank you. So I'm going to fly through these a little bit. So by all means, if you have any questions when I get through, please don't hesitate to ask. Wanted to update the group on the work of the Northern Kentucky Workforce Partner Roundtable, a collaborative group, as you all know, of workforce partners that's been together really since December of 2018. So our current project is to identify a method to share employer data among the workforce partners. So if you think about the workforce partners, think about the partners who are typically around the table during SWAT meetings, which we've heard a lot about. We're going to start small. So we're going to kind of start with that team of partners to see if we can pilot a product or a project for collecting and sharing employer data amongst the partners. It would be a very helpful tool to have in place to make our work more efficient and better serve the employers ultimately. And then We also have 2 SWAT meetings scheduled for next week. One on Tuesday, I believe, with Napoleon, and then Wednesday with Fiend. So those are happening quite regularly now. Lisa, I don't want to steal your thunder. You might be reporting this later, but she just said earlier today that we've had 22 so far SWAT meetings since the inception of SWAT meetings. So we're excited about that. We had our New Year, New Career virtual job fair last week on the 11th. We had 14 employers participate with 26 job seekers in attendance, which was underwhelming. Just to be very, very frank, we're a little bit disappointed about the number, but the event in itself was very good. We got some positive feedback from the employers and job seekers who did participate. As a matter of fact, one employer gave such a glowing review that we've added it to our testimonials on our website. We tried something new with this event by offering a morning session and an afternoon session. And I think it worked well. It really gave an opportunity for job seekers to sort of pick and choose. We had 7 employers in the morning session, 7 in the afternoon. So I think that went over well with the employers and job seekers. It gave them more flexibility in terms of picking and choosing which session to attend, whether it be based on their availability or based on the employers that were going to be represented in each session. Also wanted to just bring this group, the Business Service Committee, up to speed on the 3 ways that the Career Center is currently facilitating hiring events. This has sort of been an evolution since we've reintroduced services. Right now, as it stands, we're offering hiring events in 3 different ways for employers and job seekers, I guess. One way is scheduled in-person interviews. You've heard us talk quite a bit in the past about offering open interviews at any of our locations. We've not been able to do that because we want to, adhere to social distancing and we want to pay attention to max capacity in terms of space in our buildings. So to take the place of open interviews, we've been doing scheduled interviews where an employer identifies a window of time. Maybe it's a 3-hour time slot, and then they set up 20 to 30-minute interviews during that time period. That's worked very well so far for our employers. We've seen really good turnout for those appointments. So I can see that continuing into the future. We've also been offering quite a number of drive-through hiring events, which aren't quite as fun when it's 15 degrees outside. But before the weather turned, those were really a good option for hiring events. That's just what it sounds like. It's, employers set up at one location. That might be at the parking lot of our Career Center. It might be the parking lot of a library. But job seekers literally drive through and are able to have a conversation while in their car and gain more information about the open positions. And then the employer, of course, can ask them some questions too about their experience. And then finally, we're still continuing to offer virtual hiring events quite frequently. And we'll continue to do that, I think, into the future as well. Eagle Manufacturing Rapid Response. Ellen mentioned this last week at the Program Youth Committee meeting briefly, but I just wanted to expand upon that a little bit more. We're having our next rapid response for Eagle Manufacturing on March 3rd. Mubia is the featured employer at that event, which means that Mubia is going to be present and available to have conversations with those affected workers, which is great. Mutually beneficial for both the, Mubia and the affected workers who are going to be laid off from Eagle. And since we've been working with Eagle, the business service team, thank you to Eric Owsley for your incredible leadership with this. They were able to connect 15 different employers with Eagle Manufacturing's HR department to really do all we can to make sure those affected workers are going to be able to seamlessly transition over to another employer that's in need of a similar skill set. So that's exciting work. And not all of these things did we always do in terms of rapid response events. And so we're really trying to think differently about how we help employers through that situation. And most importantly, the affected workers. And then finally, the Young Adult and Teen Job Fair is scheduled for March 30th. We're excited about that because this is a population that we're really working hard to better engage. We're working in partnership with the Kenton County Public Library on this event. So thank you to Kenton County Public Library. And we're really trying to target employers who are more likely to hire the individuals who fall within that opportunity youth age range of 16 to 24. And we're really even asking questions to employers about whether or not they're able to hire individuals below 18, because that's certainly a population that we want to help serve as well. So, and that's all. Any questions? I'd be happy to answer.
All right, it's Fernando. I was curious, put it in the chat. Are we seeing any kind of bump in enthusiasm among young adults to work in this area, or are we still culturally in that kind of sense of after they graduate high school, who knows where they go?
Well, and I'll invite Ellen or Eric to chime in on this too. I know it's still been a challenge for us, Dr. Figueroa, as far as engaging that group. We're really thinking creatively on strategies to better outreach to that population. I think what we've been doing, quite frankly, hasn't been effective. And that might be some of the strategies are getting a little stale, or it could just be the level of enthusiasm, to your point of, maybe there's just a different mindset a little bit. So, but I like the strategies that we have in place. And I think if you want to have a more detailed breakdown of what those are, I know Ellen and Eric can probably both speak to that on the call here.
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in for just a second. So we developed a targeted outreach strategy working with key partner organizations that are really already working with our target population. And when we're talking specifically about the WIOA youth, we're talking about out of school youth. And so we are, kind of our target are those individuals who have already left high school and maybe are not really sure where they're wanting to go. The pandemic has made connecting with those individuals challenging, to say the least, as Corey said. And so we're really diving deep with key partners like Every Child Succeeds, where many of them are young mothers in that opportunity youth age range. And when we're talking about WIOA, having a youth being pregnant or parenting is one of the barriers. And so that is really helping us hone in on that targeted population. The other thing is that we have seen interest from individuals that we have kind of already engaged with, wanting to re-engage with the youth work experience or kind of dive back into that with the increase that this board approved of the salaries going from, not salaries, but the work experience dollars going from $13.25 to $16 an hour. And so we're hopeful to be getting people in the pipeline. The good news is we do have employers who are ready and willing to accept those individuals. And so we've got the employers ready to go, and we have those targeted outreach strategies to get the youth connected to those individuals and those employers.
So I had a very similar question to Dr. F's point. I guess my question is, do we have a target number of job seekers that we look at for each activity? So Corey mentioned 3 or 4 that had happened. Did we have a plan to get 20 job seekers enrolled, or 10 or 50? And I'm wondering if we have I'm sure we do, David, have a tracking mechanism to know what the results were. And are we looking at that plan versus actual to see what the results are so that we can start to do the problem solving? Ellen, your comments about the strategies are great problem solving examples for sure. But I wonder if it helps us hone in to actually what's happening.
So I can speak specifically to the youth in terms of that. With the strategies we have planned kind of like a tracking, and so we kind of backed into it. So we know that we want to get 15 to 20 youth connected to youth work experience. And so to get down to that 15 to 20, we want to outreach to 100 to 150 of those youth, knowing that 50 to 75 are going to move forward into that kind of deeper engagement and assessment piece, and then down to 15 to 20 in enrollments into those youth work experience. And so we've really backed into that way. And starting that, we're looking at, okay, how are we outreaching to 100 to 150? And then we're tracking our engagement through workshops and meetings with staff. And then of course, down into that enrollments piece.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. And then finally, you mentioned this, let me make sure I got this straight. The starting wage is going to be around $16 on some of these opportunities. Is that right? So besides just WIOA eligible job seekers, this is available for any type of job seeker. Is that true?
So I was specifically speaking to the youth work experience dollars, which are just WIOA eligibility. And that's where that $16 range comes in with the youth work experience. Our other jobs, the jobs that we're working with for employers, the hiring events and things like that, that Corey was speaking to, those salary ranges, those can range obviously based on what the employer is looking at. So those are a little bit different, but specifically for the work experience, those are just WIOA eligible opportunity youth.
So I'm wondering if, the national conversation is at $15. Northern Kentucky is talking about a living wage. I wonder if we need to put a little bit more emphasis on those dollars just to attract the numbers into these events. Brent, any comments about that or any thoughts? I mean, I know you're right in the thick of that.
No. I mean, look, it's in our interest, collective interest, and the mission of the chamber is to grow the economy. We know paying people more grows the economy, and that's a good thing. So, I mean, I think ways we can emphasize that and highlight that and encourage employers to do that as best practices and better connect people. Those are all good things that we want to do. I think when you asked that question, Dave, I jumped to some of the federal debate going on right now with minimum wage and so forth. And I can tell you there's zero support for that kind of thing at the chamber from our members. But it's not, I get the sense it's not so much that we don't want to pay. I mean, some cases they don't want to pay people more, that's for sure. But also I think it's setting national standards sometimes causes problems for us because paying somebody $15 an hour in New York and LA is completely different than paying somebody $15 here. And that's the struggle that we have. So that's my editorial. So as I said, no, and then I rambled on for like 2 minutes. You'll never get that 2 minutes back, but that's what I was thinking when you asked that.
Okay, thanks, Brent. Appreciate the comments. So anyway, I do think that, we continue on our living wage dialogue though, as we make these job fairs and these opportunities available. So that would be my request, Corey and Eric and Ellen, to keep that in front for sure, if possible.
We've just updated our flyer to make sure that we put the $16 an hour on our opportunity youth work experience flyer. So
Good. I like it.
And
And Eric,
David,
Eric,
I'm
I saw
sorry,
all your posts. Okay, sorry.
yeah, just to comment real quick. The last job fair, just looking at job quality, that was like one of the central themes about the last job fair. We hand selected these 14 employers who we thought as a job fair committee to have good job quality. So ranging from a company like iHerb, who's paying 100% employer premiums for 2021. It's like, man, that's great. Like, even though their wage is like 15 an hour, they have that. Like, we thought that was incredible. And companies like, Fidelity with great career advancement opportunities. So the 14 employers we selected, we made sure to have good job quality. I just wanted to comment.
Yeah, I'm sure. Okay, great. All right, any more comments about programming? If not, Corey, thanks a lot. Great report. Eric and Ellen, great work. Natalie, I know that you're involved coming, so appreciate all the support.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, next is the information about partnership from GROW. Lisa's going to bring us up to speed on current activities there. There you are.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Hey, Lisa. What do you got for us today?
Thanks for having me today. I have quite a bit today, so I'm going to try to talk really fast. So the first thing I wanted to mention, a big GROW win, is Governor Bashir's move to move childcare workers into the 1B vaccination group. That has been a conversation that we've been having with all of our subject matter experts in that Pillar 1 early childhood education area to make sure that they have the proper protection they need. As we know, childcare is a huge barrier for employees. So very excited about that. Second is the Pillar 2 K through 12 area, a little update for My Career E3. The regional work-based learning platform has been created and is in the beta launch process, thanks to the project team. And you all may remember that project team is led by John Baines of Insight Partners. Currently, there are 78 companies, partners listed, so 24 students searching and 26 opportunities posted. This week, nearly 300 companies, organizations received an invite to engage with the platform from the Northern Kentucky Chamber. The invite message is being shared in other partners such as the WIB, Northern Kentucky Triad, to encourage an increase in opportunities posted to that platform. So please feel free to share that broadly. Communication process is being created for that college and career connection that includes centralized points of contact across the education community and employer partners. And then finally, a user-friendly work-based learning manual based on the KDE's manual was created for the college and career counselors, as well as a version for employers for that particular platform. So that's the update for My Career E3. And then Corey mentioned the SWAT meetings, and he's absolutely correct. There were 22 employers that we either have scheduled or have met with, and they are rolling in regularly. We are updating our website at the Chamber to include a lot of those employer resources, including the Employer Resource Guide. And we are also adding a section about the SWAT meetings and a jot form so employers can sign up to reach out and request a SWAT meeting. We currently have a 4.82 rating out of 5 as far as expectations. So that's pretty exciting. And then a 4.93 that employers will be following up with one of the resources provided during the SWAT meeting. We're preparing to launch a follow-up survey with SWATs that we've done in the past 3 to 6 months to find out how the follow-up is going with partners and to learn more about where they are in the timeline process of the comprehensive plan that partners created for them. You all may remember we have an average of about 30 action items per employer coming out of these SWAT meetings. So our partners are very busy with opportunities to engage employers and provide them with these resources. It's pretty exciting. In the talent attraction and retention area, I wanted to let everyone know we are doing some human-centered design work. So there's a lot of discovery work happening right now, specifically with workforce of color, as well as employers seeking to hire and retain a workforce of color, and also with employers that have best practices in place around diversity, equity, and inclusion. As we finalize some of those discovery interviews, we will be pulling together a report of common opportunity areas, similar to what we did with the immigrant integration work. And we'll be bringing more of that back to this group. I heard a lot of mention earlier about attracting young professionals and young adults in the workforce. And this is a big part of that. So we want to make sure that we're creating programming and providing the resources that are needed to keep them here in the region and keep them on a strong career pathway. And then finally, employer policies and practice, the Employer Best Practice Symposium We have almost 100 folks registered for that. We have 10 breakout sessions scheduled. We also have 2 panels. The first panel is all about job quality and level setting with employers on the return on investment. For job quality, Janice Urbanik as well as Thomas Koken will be presenting at that. And those are both national level organizations, National Fund and then MIT. And then our closing panel is on inclusive leadership and the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. And we have several local leaders as well as Canopy Kentucky presenting out on that panel. The session breakouts were designed around the job quality framework that was created by the National Fund. So very excited to really have a plan in place to help our employers really build best practices. You know, in Northern Kentucky, we want to be recognized as the best place to work, right? So that's where we're headed. Any questions?
So Lisa, you mentioned something about certifications in the very first or second paragraph of your report out, talking about the certification activities that you worked with KDE. That's a little bit of our next topic, and I want to make sure that we're not crossing, doing dual work. Can you run through that real quickly again for me?
Sure. It wasn't about certifications. We created a work-based learning manual that was based on the KDE's manual
Okay.
in order to use for the My Career E3 platform. And that manual was created for college and career counselors as well as for employers.
Okay, great.
To use
Thanks.
the platform. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
All right, great work. A lot going on. Good thing that you can do everything by Zoom. Otherwise, you wouldn't have enough meeting space.
You know what? You're 100% right. That is so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, that's great. That's
No
great.
time for travel.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, great. Anything else for Grow? Any questions, comments before we move on? Okay, good. The next area on the agenda is the data analysis side. We're going to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the certification, the industry certification status update, and where we are on that. We're going to need to ask this group to take a vote because our schedule is changing slightly, and I want to make sure that we're lined up to get everything to the full WIB on the appropriate schedule. And then we're also going to talk about the KPIs a little bit. But first, I want to talk about the industry certification process. We talked about this probably since November, so shouldn't come to it as a surprise. But just to bring everybody up to speed, again, one of the things that we are doing is going through the industry certifications that the KDC or the KDE requires or supports the school systems with, to make sure that the students and the young adults have certification opportunities appropriately made available to them. One of the WIB roles is to make sure that we bring together the business entities to have justifiable and reasonable certifications and credentials ready for these students. So what we had done is we brought together an ad hoc committee that met in January and in February to talk a little bit about the data and the certifications and the credentials that were available to everybody. We also wanted to make sure that the ones that were on the current list were solid, and the ones that were being asked for by the industry or being asked by students were pushed forward into the process so that we can get them approved. And several of you have been part of that conversation. I think Natalie was there. Most of the Gateway folks participated. Vicki was part of that. So, and I hope I haven't forgotten too many other people, but a lot of good support. So, and some of the meeting minutes are, of course, in the meeting minutes that you just looked at. So if you've got some questions, you can go back. But what we did do is we broke the certifications into 4 groups, and then we assigned team captains for those. And so those are healthcare, IT and data, manufacturing, and logistics and construction. So that data is all due back to us coming up. And I think it's starting to come in. Dave and Tara are going to talk a little bit about that, I hope, as far as the data coming in. What we
Yes.
are looking to kind of try to support is we will not be able to come to a conclusion in this meeting, I think. However, what we are hoping to be able to do is look at the recommendations coming from each one of these sector captains and hopefully forward that to the executive committee for discussion later this month, and then into the full WIB for a vote in the beginning of March. What we want to talk about as far as from our role as BSC is we would like to take a vote in looking at these recommendations very quickly today at a high level, and then giving us the authorization to take those to the executive committee and to the board without seeing the final results, frankly, until that board meeting. So keep that in the back of the mind as we go through the dialogue that Tara and Dave are going to bring forward. And we'll talk a little bit more about it before we make the motion.
Yep. I'm gonna kick us off, and I have a number of updates for you all. I'm gonna share my screen in just a moment, and then if you have questions for David Faulkner, let us know, and David's kind of available for that. I'm gonna skip straight to the Dave talked about, the different leads. And so I am going to share with you what each of them, each industry is in kind of a different spot, but there's a lot of good preliminary information coming in. Dr. Figueroa posted in the chat, the reason we want to do this is kind of twofold. One, we really want our students to be able to have meaningful career pathways and really to feel that what they're learning in high school is leading them in a direction. Maybe it's just career exploration, and that might lead them to, additional post-secondary education. And then, the other thing that we want to do is if they are not pursuing additional post-secondary, this might be an opportunity for them to have a skill that they're able to take to that next employer if they're going to be employed straight out of high school. On the flip side, we obviously want our employers, and many of you in the room, to have individuals who have skills or are on the pathway toward the skills that you all need. And so as we took these this list that KDE has put together a couple years ago, and we divided out by our target industries, so 5 different sectors, we asked 2 questions. One, is there anything missing? So are there skill sets that you are looking for as an employer that you do not see on here that you feel like need to be added? And we did not limit employers to things that would be really more set for high school students. We just said, is there anything missing? Because we can later work with KDE to filter out anything that we feel like is just not going to work in a high school setting. And then after this process is over, we'll be working with the KCC team to also look at our eligible training provider list and see if there's anything that's come up in these conversations that's really focused on high school that needs to potentially be looked at in terms of any gaps for our adult learners as they're getting training through WIOA funding through the ETPL list. And then the other thing we asked them for, is there anything on this list that just needs to come off? Because I think really what would be a very terrible situation is if we have any youth that are going through these trainings, they're in high school, and then they walk into an employer and they are like, look, I have the certification. And the employer's like, what is that? That doesn't matter to me, right? That would just be such a, I think just a disenfranchised, just a very disappointing kind of a situation and such a waste of time. So we asked for what should be added and what should be taken off. And I'm going to hopefully share my screen here. I feel like even though I do this all the time, it's always just a little bit scary if it's actually going to work. Yes. Okay, great. So I'm just going to start with advanced manufacturing. It starts with an A. So there we go. These aren't really in alphabetical order though. So with advanced manufacturing, our lead just that came out of the ad hoc committee was Dr. Terry Von Handorf from Gateway. She is working very closely with the employers that are involved in Northern Kentucky FAME. So she sent out a preliminary email to 60 employers. We were not surprised that so far we've only gotten 2 responses back. The 2 that we got back were very thorough. And then she actually has a meeting scheduled for tomorrow to get additional feedback. We did get preliminary recommendations from those 2 employers to actually take off 11 of the certifications that are related to advanced manufacturing. Most of them related to CAD or AutoCAD, different kinds of like engineering software. So we will be, and that's why, unfortunately, we're not quite ready today, just because Northern Kentucky FAME meets tomorrow. But we have, and you'll see in a minute, I have all the recommendations outlined for you to look at. And you'll see just a note that I've put next to all of them that she'll be seeking additional feedback about those 2 recommendations or 2 responses tomorrow to find out if there's a concurrence among the other members. Okay, so next we have transportation logistics, which is our next industry sector. The lead is Lorraine O'Moore, who is the college and career connector. So you heard Lisa Mulcahy talking about My Career E3. This is a great opportunity for us to make sure that we are really tied in perfectly with the work that's going in on pillar 2 of GROW, and really making sure that we understand what's going on in the conversations with our career counselors and as they're guiding students. So Lorraine has been working directly with supply chain OKI. That's about 30 employers. She reached out to them as a group and then on 1 additional employer, and she's recommending the addition of 3 very specific certifications in the supply chain field. Again, you'll see those in just a moment. Construction and trades, Lorraine is our contact for this sector as well. So far, she's just reached out to 4 employers. I reached out today to Vicki Burling. And so I see Brian Bozeman is on this call too, and I would really like to get some additional feedback from both of you about this list. So that is another piece that we'd like to add into our response. In healthcare, we had a big joint effort. I partnered with Zach Morgan from the Kentucky Chamber, Hope Arthur from Health Collaborative, and Shelley Baker, who is with the co-op. She is the lead on locally for the Kentucky Youth Apprenticeship, which, by the way, I just joined their steering committee so that we can have a more seamless transition and alignment between our 2 organizations. The Health Collaborative has already been working on a lot of this topic, not so much with certifications, but just thinking about training needed. So we were able to go through the list with them as well as with St. Elizabeth. The Health Collaborative recommends 8 additional certifications. They are not outlined on this because Hope didn't really have, there were more like occupations. So I think they're going to be more likely to fall under our ETPL adult learner pathway. St. Elizabeth felt like the list was really good to go the way it was. But I did just want to mention that as we think about adult learners, we have some additional options to pursue. IT, business, and finance, Ellen Bates and Eric Owsley, who you all know well, took the lead on this piece. They were able to reach out to several different companies and IT professionals. The recommendations coming out of this group are adding 9 additional certifications and removing 5. So here's what's recommended for removal. A lot of these, again, seeking more input on the advanced manufacturing side, which will happen tomorrow. And then a number on the IT side. Microsoft Access, I don't know how often any of us make those kinds of databases any longer. There's really new platforms for that. PowerPoint Flash has been discontinued by Adobe. So these are things where we have a couple notes of not the entire certification to be scrapped, but really just updating what's being taught, like Java. It's at 8 in the KDE list. They're now at 15 for programmers. So they really just need to update it. And then this is the list of items that need to be added or I guess being recommended to be added. in a number of different fields, as I mentioned. So that's that list. And I think, okay, yeah, I think I am done. So I can come off here and come back to you guys. So as I mentioned, and sorry if you were chatting with me, I was not able to receive what you put in the chat. Oh, Lorraine. So Lorraine is actually with Navigo, as Vicki mentioned, but Shelly is with the co-op group. So they really are very complementary positions. Shelly focuses only on healthcare, and basically Lorraine takes the rest of the industry areas. So, but they're funded differently, and so they're based in two different organizations. Lorraine's actually funded by KDE funding, and Shelly's work is actually funded through WIOA statewide reserve dollars. So, oh, thanks, Dave has a further correction. But I think working with them has been very good for us so that we make sure that those pathways that the WIB is really thinking about, how are we supporting our employers and our job seekers at that point. I think that this is a good list. As a reminder, what's next is anything that's recommended to be added to the KDE list, we will need to explain and justify with employer feedback documented to go to the KWIB and eventually to KDE. So if there's too many, it might, we might not get as many through. So like last time we did this, we added one. I'm very comfortable with, definitely doing more than one. But I think we need to make sure that we're able to go to KWIB and really be able to justify each one of the additions. And so I think the way that we've been able to go through this with leads who are working with employers in each one of these sectors is really going to make it more likely that they actually add what's being requested to the list. So I'm going to stop there for just a second and ask if anybody has any questions or feedback. Nope. Okay. Dave, do you have any feedback?
Well, I was going to say that that list is, it's certainly much greater than one, but probably not appropriate for what our students are really looking for. One of the things that Tara and I have discussed is making sure that we have a manageable, smaller list this time. And then working through this process during the year to make sure that we get all the information during the year so that it doesn't come to a rush this time next year. And I think that Tara's 100% correct in making sure that we have the industry backup and support and confidence of what we're recommending, and we're just not throwing items out there. When I looked at the original list of certifications from a couple of years ago, I think people were just cutting and pasting what they thought was appropriate, and 50% was kind of bogus, I thought. So in this case, what we want to try to do is get an ongoing process so that we can add on a monthly or regular basis. So at the end of the period next year, we have a list that we can really defend correctly. So part of that is the reason that we're trying to pare it down a little bit.
And I would think, this is Fernando, just a way to, my comment in the chat, to prioritize it is to focus on, some sort of criteria where the open opportunity or the opportunity that opens up by virtue of the credential or the certification, and then how critical is that certification to getting the door open? Because we've run into situations in our gateway where we had credentials and certifications, but we would talk to the employers and it's like, yeah, we don't really care if they have it or not. We'll take anybody. And certainly as the pressures of unemployment and we get back to full employment again, that's going to become more of an issue.
Right, I think that's absolutely correct. And one of the things that we found out, and Dr. Figueroa, you know this very well, is that if the employer says that they're going to utilize or they like the credential, it's a normal reaction for you to go out and look for an instructor and start to develop curriculum and go through a process And I can't tell you how many times I've heard you come back and say, we did all of that, we got it all in line, and we had one student show up, and we've spent $5,000. So we've got to make sure that that the educational institutions return on investment is solid, but at the same time, the businesses are going to utilize that.
If I could just also add, yeah, I think one of the challenges is if you've ever seen the CTE manual that goes with this, it's this big. So in my one little tiny sliver of all of this, there are probably 10 pathways that they're talking about. And under each pathway, there may be 4 or 5 of these certifications that they're saying are acceptable. So in my one little world, there may be 30 of them. So if we change one a year, we're never going to get there.
Right. Absolutely, Vicky. And to keep in mind too, that, so in Northern Kentucky, depending on, I think we have for our region, or for our 8-county region, we have 18 different school districts, if I'm not mistaken. And so not all of them are teaching every single one of these, just to make sure everybody's aware. So we might have a school district that is teaching 5 career and technical education pathways. We might have another school system that's teaching 7, and they're completely different than, and so there have been some schools that have worked together. We also have efforts like Ignite and Beechwood has Edge. Every school system kind of has their own thing, it seems like. But I just want to remind everybody that it is a little bit tricky because every school does have their own direction, and which is really potentially very appropriate depending on their students and nearby employers. Because if they want to have engagement with career E3, they also have to think about how their students are going to get to those work-based learning opportunities. And so if they wanted to align, they have to think about what's going to work for their students in that particular case. But the good news is that we can at least do our part to ask employers what is appropriate. What are they? One way that Terry von Handorf asked, which I thought was really good, was, would you prefer one job seeker, one prospective, candidate over another if they had the certification? And so that's what we're really trying to get to, is not just would you take that person, but would you prefer them? Is it something that if they pursued this certification and received it, it would make them more desirable than someone who did not have it? And so we are really trying to get to that where it's really a skill building and not just a sort of a way to spend their time in school. So happy to have more conversation, but we do have a lot of other things to share with you today. So Dave, as I mentioned, we are seeking just a little bit more input, but I think we are getting closer. And I will be joining a group that has been put together by the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board. So representing WIB directors, to actually talk with them about making this a more ongoing year-long process and not just a rush every couple years to look through the list and sort of like check a box, but to actually think through how do we have ongoing relationships with our employers where we're really asking about the skills that they need. So I'll of course let you all know once those meetings get started what that looks like.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, because I know, Terry, you've got a lot to talk about outside of this, we need to structure, this group needs to approve the next steps forward so that we can line up correctly. As you saw, we're not going to be able to get all the information in today's meeting from all the industry leads that we have. And there's one other ad hoc meeting that will take place next week, just as a wrap up. What I would like to get approval to do today is to take those recommendations to the executive board. And then from the executive board, make a final presentation to the full WIB in March at the March meeting. But unfortunately, this group is not going to meet before then. So I need to somehow structure a motion that gets your approval without you seeing the data. I'm sorry, but that's just how it's going to shake out. Any comments about that? Any discussion? Anybody has some verbiage that makes sense? Certainly would look forward to hearing from anybody about
How about that we motion to send the information that we have with the understanding that will be refined with further feedback to the executive committee with the intent of identifying the key credentials or certifications to move forward with as the WIB here in Northern Kentucky to the bigger strategy.
I'm okay on that. Any conversation, any other discussion points on that?
You know, I'm completely fine with that as well. I mean, that's a really detailed motion there, Mr. President. So I'll let you go that route. I was going to suggest maybe that we authorize the committee chair to approve on behalf of the committee based on previous understood conditions, something like that. But yours is just as good, probably better than that. But I was just giving somebody authority. I would also be okay with that as well. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, so that's just my thought.
So can we amend my motion to match Brent's motion?
Connie Madden, were you writing all of this down?
Luckily, we record these.
That's what I was just gonna say. My head's starting to spin.
Right.
Sorry, I do that.
It's okay. It's all good.
Connie, can you read back maybe a little bit of what Dr. F said, and we'll insert Brent's paragraph slashing.
I apologize, but I really can't. I thought as soon as he started speaking, I'm just gonna listen to the Zoom recording and get it,
Yeah.
and whatever they decide, we'll go with. My apologies.
I think Brent's got the right idea is
Yeah.
that the motion is to empower the chair of this committee to work with the executive committee to determine the best course of action in this area.
And I would like to add that we'll present that at the March WIB meeting for
There you
final vote.
Does that work for you, Brent?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to vote on it one way or another, the
Right.
ultimate numbers. I think everybody can chime in via email if they have a concern with what's shared. So I personally think that would be fine.
So there's a motion on the floor. Can I hear a motion to accept?
Second.
The second?
Was that Michelle? Okay, Michelle Tyson, I think.
Was there a second and a first and second?
I was the first.
Okay, great. Michelle was the second. Thank you. I saw Janet leap in there. All right, great. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, great. Motion carries. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. This is going to be a great activity, I think, for the future. Some really big steps this first time. So thanks for the support, and a big shout out to the ad hoc leads. They've done a lot of good work. Okay. Next
Okay.
on the agenda is KPI, but we still have the regional plan, and we're running about 10 minutes late right now.
Yes. Okay, so I hate to do this to David Klockner, but everyone received the KPI in your email. So does anybody have any questions about it? David, if you want to just show it on the screen, but not necessarily go over it all. If anyone has any questions, we're actually going to talk about KPIs sort of as part of our local plan effort. So just as a reminder, this was what was in your packet. Speak now if you want to talk about something. Otherwise, we are going to move on because we do have a lot to discuss. Nope. Okay. If you change your mind, email us and we will be happy to talk you through any aspect of the KPI document. David, if you want to take that down. Okay. Sorry about that, but yeah, so I'm going to kind of talk you guys through why we have so much to talk about today and why we are in just a bit of a hurry. And that is because when we Dana Dobbs asked me, of course, to lead a strategic planning effort, but we also have a requirement, it's part of WIOA, to do a local and a regional plan. It's really, those are more comprehensive in nature. And so we knew that the local and regional plan timelines were coming up. And so Dana elected to really make those concurrent, right? And so that way you guys don't get too much planning fatigue. And we would do the more comprehensive local plan. And then we would, take the themes out and priorities out to turn those into your strategic plan for the board. I reached out to the state and I asked them what was the deadline, and they said June 30th, and I said great. And then we built our whole plan around that, the timeline. Unfortunately, that timeline has now changed. So the deadline is now, for a while it was March 31st, and last week it changed again to April 30th, which I guess is fine. But it's still a lot sooner than we had thought. So what we're gonna do is we are not at this committee meeting going to be able to talk about the entire plan. We're dividing up sections by committee, and so that we can really make sure that each section gets talked about in depth, but not everybody's going to talk about each section. Everyone's welcome though at every single committee meeting if you would like to dive in on a different section than what is going to be talked about today. So our mission, vision, and value statements, including a decision by the executive committee and the strategic planning committee to add a diversity, equity, and inclusion statement for the board. That is being handled at the executive committee meeting, well, actually probably a little bit at the MBO committee meeting, executive committee, and the strategic planning committee meeting. So I just wanted you guys to know that even though I'm not mentioning it today, that topic continues. But today I'm going to go over some of the sections of the local plan, because that's due first, the local and regional plan, the WIOA part. I'm going to go over some of the sections that are really pertain to the Business Services Committee. And some of these you already answered in the survey that we sent out in December. And so for all of those of you that responded to that, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it. Sometimes people weren't really sure exactly what to answer, and that's also fine. And that's why we have a meeting, so that we can kind of get together and flesh out a few of the ideas. So I'm going to go through and ask you guys questions. If I don't hear any feedback, we're going to move on to the next question. Okay, cool. And then in March, at the March 9th WIB meeting, there will be topics for further conversation that come out. Probably we are going to need a special meeting, because we also have to fit in a public comment period into this. The public comment period has to be at least 14 days long, and it's not going to have enough time in between the February 24th executive committee meeting and the March 9th meeting to have a public comment period. So just if you're wondering sort of like why I feel rushed, it's because we got to fit a lot of things into a relatively short time frame. We also will be working with Kentuckiana Works, which is Louisville, Bluegrass, which is Lexington, and Lincoln Trail, which is like Bardstown, Elizabethtown area, to do the regional components of this plan. For those of you that have been on the WIB for a while, this might sound familiar to you, because that was the same local areas who we planned with last time. So we'll be planning with them again. All right. I heard somebody maybe had a question. Okay. Let me know if you have a question. I'm going to go on. So one of the things that is important in our local plan, actually from a regional standpoint, this is one of the regional questions, is really looking at strengths and weaknesses of our workforce development activities and our capacity to provide both services to individuals, but also meeting the employment needs of employers in our region. Today, we talked a little bit about some of the challenges that we've had for employers in terms of finding a sufficient number of prospects for them. And so, and we've talked about some of the things that the KCC team is already doing on those. But I am interested to hear if there's anything that you all feel needs to go into the planning process regarding other employer services that, you know, you really feel you would like to see the WIB at least investigate, or just challenges that you'd like to make sure are mentioned and addressed. And I see some people shaking their heads. So maybe you want to comment. I can call on the people that were shaking their heads if you guys want me to, but no? Okay, well, that's a big part of this, you know, plan, is to sort of address some challenges. And so I will say that we don't have to have it all figured out. And I do intend to put something in there about some of the workforce challenges that we've had. But if you have anything in particular, barriers wise, that you'd like to mention, please let me know. You can email me too.
Yeah, this is Fernando. I mean, I think, yeah, you know, I'm going to talk. So I still think that we haven't built the translation between business speak and edu speak, in terms of, you know, we tend to think in terms of, as we did, certifications, credentials, but that conversation is so much broader and so much more diverse and diffuse, where businesses will say, look, you know, if I have 3 people in a room, I can just talk to them for 15 minutes and I can decide which one, you know, person I want, and their credential be damned. It doesn't really matter. So I think that there has been also the conversation that job descriptions are what jobs really want. It's like, that's not right. You know, because we have job descriptions that are either antiquated, haven't been reviewed or revised in 20 years, and they're thrown out there. And so this idea of what are the competencies that as a region we're genuinely trying to accomplish, it gives our K through 12 something to target, and not just, you know, to rely on specific certifications that can change in a heartbeat, or sectors that can change in a 3 to 5 year period, but that allows us to get a sense of, you know, getting this translation between EduSpeak and BizSpeak, where we're talking not about credentials and pathways so much as what are the core competencies that we genuinely want to be able to accomplish? How do we assess them? How do we, you know, verify and validate them with our business partners? And how do we create an incentive where business partners come together and, you know, generate the work? It's a conversation we've had about the WIB. We don't have enough really engaged business participation. We've got a lot of social sector, a lot of education sector, a lot of training sector, but we don't have yet those drivers from the business side of it that are helping clarify the conversation and drive some of the conversations. Rather, I think there's a sense of, you guys figure it out and we'll just, you know, receive what you create. And I think we've got to get to a better job of an ecosystem, which is that push-pull together, working together to help us do that. The other thing it'll help us do is really identify that no matter what sector is hot right now or cold the next day, we've got a competency that we're building that's in the right direction of the community we're trying to create.
Yeah, and I will point out, Vicky mentioned the issue with competencies and skill sets in the chat as well. So thank you, Vicky, for that. I agree. I will just point out, for those of you that are new, we do have I think 52% of the board right now is from the business sector. They don't always have the best attendance, so thanks to those of you who are here today. But they technically are, you know, present on the board. So anybody else want to weigh in? I think the competency piece is huge. And I agree with you, Dr. Figueroa, that really being that translator, I think that's a place that the WIB can really help out. And so I really see in this plan an opportunity to put in place some of those ideas and some direction for the WIB moving forward. And that's a theme that keeps coming out in all of your comments. So Brent, you took you off mute. I'm ready.
Yeah, no, I want to echo what Fernando just said, and I think he's right. And I think while we have made strides, we just have to continue to fight that battle. The other thing I think, part of what I was so passionate about was regarding GROW was the early childhood piece that often the WIB wouldn't talk about because it wasn't directly the workforce, the short-term workforce issue that we talk about normally. And that early childcare piece has come out big, I think, for the chamber, even recently as we were trying to get them elevated from 1C to 1B in terms of vaccine distribution. But then also talent attraction. I feel like as much as we have to communicate between businesses and educators, we also have to communicate with our elected officials and folks on the importance of immigration, the importance of being a welcoming place, and why that matters to talent in the long term. Yes, we have to grow the folks we've got. We also have to bring more people here. If we just grow the folks we've got, we still lose. And that's our position right now. And both Triad and the Chamber, and even Meet NKY, I think if you talk to Julie Kirkpatrick or Lee Kroom, they'll tell you our number one economic development issue is talent, is workforce. And you're going to see a big push from us verbally in speeches and comments and things that we do subtly. And I would just ask that the group also recognize that as big of a piece of the pie as anything else. So I just want to get those two thoughts in.
So, to Brent's point, that's absolutely correct. And the WIB can act as a convening point for that conversation. We do have 52% business, but you saw the results of the Gateway survey with FAME. 2 out of 30 employers replied back. That's not untypical. So the WIB has to be that convening point for small, medium, large employers to get their points across for whatever Triad or Meet NKY or whatever group is having the dialogue at the time. So that's my 2 cents on where we need to be in that direction.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to comment about that? If you think of something else, let me know. This next question is actually just kind of like a development point from what we just talked about just a little bit more deeply. So one of the things that is in the local plan is identify and describe the strategies and services that are and will be used to meet and facilitate engagement of employers, including small employers and employers in in-demand industry sectors and occupations. I mean, a lot of what we're going to be able to put into this section is really so much of what Eric and the BSRs have been doing lately, with really being focused. I mean, the ties with rapid response and really being able to talk very, specifically about, what layoffs and how they are going to be able to connect with employers that have a need, I think is huge there. Similarly, the next part of this is, what are our strategies and services around supporting a local workforce development system that meets the needs of businesses? I mean, Brent, to your point, have the same conversations with Kimberly Rossetti at Triad on a regular basis, and she's a member of this group as well. She's actually meeting with the company today, so she couldn't join. But how do we help our local employers stay here, right? How are we doing that, layoff aversion piece to make sure that we keep them, especially with their number one issue being talent? Whether that's talking about quality jobs or whether it's, attracting individuals and maybe attracting people from outside of the country, or maybe attracting people from other parts of Kentucky where they don't have as many jobs as we do. I feel like I'm humble bragging every time I talk to my fellow WIB directors and, they're talking about how many job openings can I put them down on a list. I'm like, no, I can't put our job openings on a list. We have thousands. So, I think there's a lot of good things going on in this section. I would just say, this is the WIB's opportunity to really think about what those strategies are, some of that being alignment. I'd like to hear Brent say we and mean the WIB too when these conversations about workforce. That's really important to me, and same for our local officials. And so, I don't know that we have anything that we necessarily need to add. We kind of covered it in the first section, but that's another question that's is very, very specifically, what are those strategies? And so those are the kinds of things that I'm going to be putting in that section. And again, knowing that this is a little bit different than our strategic plan, the local plan is much more about list everything that you've thought of ever and put it down on paper. So let's see. How will you better coordinate workforce development programs with your economic development partners? So this is the section where we talk about all of you, right? We talk about all of the official partners of the KCC, of which there are, what, 13? Is that right? Yeah. And we talk about our community partners. We talk about our roll and grow, etc. But I did hear mention the other day about we need to be better tied to our schools. I'm wondering if that goes for our post-secondary as well as K-12. So I'm going to type that out in this section too, sort of what was mentioned earlier. But I'm just curious if anybody has any, alignment concerns or partnership concerns that they feel are missing with the WIB.
The only one I have is when we keep talking about school districts, I think we often leave out the diocese, and they are our third largest district. And it's not even close, by the way. I mean, it goes Boone, Kenton, and then the diocese, and then Campbell. And I just think that's an opportunity for all of us to keep reminding ourselves of that, and let's make sure we're making that outreach. I'm trying to do that as much as I can. I just want to make sure everybody else is as well. So that was one that jumped out at me. And we speak typically as 20 school districts because we include Bracken too. And I know the Education Council and the Education Cooperative have different school districts in their list, but we kind of look at it as 9 county when we talk about the region.
That's helpful. Yeah, that's helpful. We can't really include Bracken because they're part of Tenco, but no, I get it. No, that makes sense. And calling out the diocese is an extremely good call that is not always on my radar. So thank you for mentioning that. I just added that to the list.
Yeah, and I get why the Ed District can't, but Bracken is part of the Cincinnati MSA, and that's the reason there's that crossover for us.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I just think my colleague Denise Stiles might object to me claiming Bracken. So, okay.
I do want to say that Brent's call out of the diocese is probably something that we probably should improve our relationship with in our communication. Historically, we haven't had a lot of communication in that direction. And it makes a lot of good sense. So thanks, Brent.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Okay, the next question, I'm just looking at the time. Yeah, we have 15 minutes. This one is one that I have not heard about. I've been with the WIB now, by the way, guys, a little over a year. So if anybody wants to feel like, wow, time's going really quickly. One of the elements that we need to call out in the local and regional aspects of this comprehensive plan are describing our local and regional efforts to support and promote entrepreneurial skills training and micro enterprise services in coordination with economic development and other partners. I know a number of our partners. Obviously, I know about Blue North, and I know about some of the things that NKU does in this area. But it's been a long time since I ran the ads loan fund many years ago when I had to know a lot more about entrepreneurship. So potentially this is a section that we can obviously talk about what's going on in the region. I'm curious, as a WIB, have you guys ever really pursued entrepreneurship as a topic?
We didn't when I was chair, that I recall. I would say, I look at like Aviatra as an example of a very successful program that has had a lot of, really good success numbers. And that is still something that we as a region have to figure out. I mean, you mentioned SBDC and Blue North, and I think that's exactly right. But I think there are opportunities in that area for the WIB to play and for a whole bunch of pieces to come together more to enhance all of that. So,
yeah. I mean, I remember coming out of the last recession, entrepreneurship was a huge opportunity when people were not able to find open jobs. It's not exactly the same this time around, but I'm just kind of curious. Janet, do you have any thoughts? I kind of see you sort of thinking maybe.
Well, I actually do think entrepreneurship will be just as big an opportunity coming out of this recession as last. In some ways, even more, as particularly when you think about how much of our activity is now going online. It really reduces the need for the startup costs of brick and mortar. So there'll be opportunities that a decade ago might not have been there because of the barriers to that cost of entry.
So, I mean, probably the strategy is, that you have leads in this area and that there'll be coordination of, communication and effort to identify perhaps opportunities of maybe adding that to the rapid response conversation or something along those lines where they're good fits for individuals who are being de-jobbed and then might have an interest in doing something completely new.
And I think the Governor's School for Entrepreneurs, GSE, which is now through NKU at the moment. I think that's a huge opportunity for the region. And that, anything we can do to help support that, in addition to, the other things that were just mentioned, I think would be very smart. And we could be positioned very well for improving and that particular piece of ecosystem if we really focus collectively in the region on it. Sorry, Dave, I cut you off.
No problem. I think I'm going to echo a little bit of what you said, Brent. But what I wanted to say again is the WIB has to be viewed again as a convening point in this kind of conversation. But I like what happens at the employer roundtables. And Lisa, reported that, they were coming out of those meetings with 30 or 40 to-do items, which are great to do. It might be good to see if we can mesh an employer roundtable kind of activity focused on that segment, on that those new areas. So it's not totally brick and mortar, as Janet said, but it's more of a innovation or an ideal area that we can start to look at.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you. Okay. Any other thoughts about entrepreneurship or micro enterprise? Yes.
This is a very, very small component, but I'll just mention one thing to you because I know when you're talking about entrepreneurship, we're all thinking businesses, build things, all those kinds of things. But we anticipated last spring that many people were not going to be hiring back to their regular jobs. So we did a program through DBL Law on developing your own LLC, becoming a consultant in service types businesses. We're doing that again in April, but I can tell you we're seeing multiple people who chose to do consulting contracts with people that they're getting hired right now. Employers are willing to hire those people on a temporary contract basis. They don't have benefits, but at least they have salaries and they have jobs. And then we're also seeing people then going on to getting hired into full-time roles. So that's just a small aside. We're thinking of an LLC as a service consulting type business, not necessarily entrepreneur, but just as a small component.
Yeah, no, that's great, Natalie. And I think it would be really, really wonderful to make. I mean, I know we always work with you guys to highlight your programs that are coming up, but making sure that, I mean, I know the Community Action Commission, Katrina's not here today, but they for a while had like a micro lending program, for example, the ad does as well. So maybe just making sure that we've got that component sort of, at least ties and resources outlined there. That's a really good point. I made a note that you guys are doing some of that. So thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit very quickly. Is there anyone, the local plan component of this calls for description of how we are going to provide continuous improvement of business services and operate a job-driven delivery system. Now, I know the KCC actually has an entire committee that is specifically focused on continuous quality improvement. And so we certainly are going to be able to outline that work as we go through answering the questions of this plan. But I was just curious because one of the things that came out several times in the survey were board members who said they would really like to see us sort of living the data, if you will, or, you know, making decisions that are really based on the data that you're seeing. I saw, you know, Brand had a question, you know, is our labor force participation really back up to 67%, you know, locally? You know, I just want to call out for a second that as you guys think about, you know, how do we take the data that we have and really make sure we're using it to make good decisions, you know, you guys as a board, it's really helpful for us as staff to sort of know, you know, what does that look like in your mind in terms of continuous improvement? We have so much data that we can give you, and I think sometimes it's too much, right? We need to pare it down and maybe really focus on some key areas. And so I'm just curious, as my last question, we're almost done, if you have any feedback about, you know, decision making based on data, and if you'd just like to, you know, provide anything in terms of as we move forward. One of the trends I'm seeing for the strategic plan, just so you know, is that data piece, and really making sure that we're able to focus as a staff in providing you as board members with data in a timely way that sort of simultaneously allows you to think high level, but also allows you to dive in when you need to. And we'll talk about in the strategic plan, you know, what that looks like. But I just want to ask if anyone has any feedback right now about that, something that's come up a few times.
Tara, I'll jump in here. Yeah, I've had this conversation with you, so this is not going to surprise you. But I do think it's important every year at the start, we have new board members, for them to have a thorough understanding of the data that we are sharing with them. As I have shared with you, I am not a big fan of the burning glass data. I think it can be very misleading if you do not understand what it's actually presenting. So I think that should be something it's just part of new board onboarding and new board members is to truly understand the definitions of the data that we're using.
I think that is a good call out.
Sorry, just having an explanation sometimes. We've been doing it at the Chamber of the State to explain the yabbits, what I call the yabbits. I just coined that word, but it's so 67% participation rate. Yeah, but that includes December where they kind of hired extra for Christmas, or but there were people that have dropped out of the worker pool altogether because of childcare, because of whatever, and so that data gets skewed. I don't often know those yabbits. I don't know those explanations, but having something there would kind of help us. And we run into this at the Chamber all the time. We'll have 2 people in a program. We add 2 people. We've increased it by 100%. Right? We went from 2 to 4, but we only added 2. You know, so it's the way we present it and explain it, I think would be really helpful. So I agree with Janet, having everybody a broad understanding, but even as the data comes out, I think for those of you that know those little details and nuggets that maybe the rest of us don't, it would be really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is Fernando. I would just, you know, again, think about how the data doesn't stand on its own, that it either generates momentum or it stalls momentum. And, you know, we've kind of been looking at the KPI dashboard as a way of kind of how does it help us understand the movement we're trying to create and how effective we are in generating that movement. So, you know, something that we did in our strategic plan with our board was to focus on KPIs relevant to. So there's a listing of the KPIs relevant to the key planks on the strategic plan. So then it gets a sense of where we're trying to go to and what are our markers, the red, yellow, green markers that we're identifying to help us determine, are we focused on the key levers of movement in the direction that we want, or are we losing ground? And they will help, I think, address the yeah buts, because it's just the data by itself. And you say, okay, oh, I'm going to interpret that by some, you know, disjointed, you know, idea. Rather, it's like, you know, if we're going to be focused on this, you know, initiative, these are the 3 dedicated points that we want everyone focused on. And this is how we're going to interpret whether or not we're moving in the right direction or not. And then that gives us as an opportunity as the board to really think, well, okay, how is this relevant to our particular zones of influence, and provide feedback we can help the work.
Yep, absolutely. Great. Yeah, I definitely appreciate you guys having that conversation and all of that feedback. Anyone else? Okay. Dave? I'm
Okay.
done.
Oh, great, great. Well, thanks everybody for the feedback. Annual plans and strategic plans are always a chore and always very helpful and always very appreciative for input. Next on the agenda very quickly is any new business, anything that we need to know about on our radar, any pressing comments that need to be brought to the BSC so we can start to work through those. I will say that after we get this industry prudential activity completed, we'll be looking for projects. So if you've got a pet peeve or something that you want to talk a little bit about, now's the time to plant that seed. All right.
So Brent and Janet, maybe you guys can give us a sense of what should we be paying attention to as we look at the Kentucky comeback?
Well, one thing for me, I mean, transportation is a huge concern for the state. We're behind our surrounding states. We're in terms of what we're able to spend, and Northern Kentucky is behind the rest of the state. It's just my editorial. We don't get our fair share back, and so on pretty much anything, that's the way I feel about it. Workforce services included, right? I mean, we've seen that over the years where we see unfair cuts in our region, and so we feel like a push for transportation solutions is necessary. It's one of the things we're focused on. There are things like the horse racing bill that just passed. It's a great thing because Turfway can now resume construction. They put that on hold, and that impacts our collective ecosystem. We've been talking about things that differentiate Northern Kentucky from even greater Cincinnati or the country, and one of those things is horses and bourbon. You know, that's something Kentucky's known for, and so we're hoping that that will continue to help us bring people here. So transportation, tourism, ways to support businesses. We've been really making pushes throughout this year to help our small businesses survive. We just talked about the entrepreneurs. A lot of them that had just started up weren't eligible for certain things, and then there were local grants that Lexington and Louisville were able to do that we weren't able to do. And so all of those things impact us as a region. And then another side thing, legal liability protections. That's something we're keeping a very close eye on because that impacts all of your organizations on this right now, as well as all of the businesses. And so if you haven't chimed in to a local legislator on their asking them to support Senate Bill 5 as an example, which is the legal liability protection, I would encourage you to consider doing that. I think it'll help all the businesses, but it'll help all of your organizations as well. So those are just some early thoughts, Fernando, when you asked about things that we're thinking about. I mean, our number one focus is getting out of this mess. And so it seems like every day I'm talking vaccines, and the numbers are encouraging in terms of more and more vaccine coming out. And we are now scheduling our annual dinner for September. We're hoping for a big blowout. We had 1,100 last time we could all get together in person. We're thinking even bigger than that this year in September, as of right now, based on some recent numbers that have continued to go up from what we're hearing at the national level. So as soon as that, obviously nobody knows for sure, and that's so fluid but those are things that we're really focused on, helping businesses survive and get out of this freaking mess. And then we can get back to hopefully focusing on these other topics that we talked about.
Fernando, I would say from like just trying to understand how we're doing, how to gauge, I would focus on number of jobs, average hours worked per week, and average wages per week. I would pay very little attention to the unemployment rate, simply because right now that data is just almost unreliable because there's been so many changes to who is and isn't eligible for unemployment insurance and for unemployment payout that it's really made that data kind of not usable right now. The jobs numbers come from employers. They either have somebody employed or they don't. And so right now, we're a little over 5% below where we were this time a year ago before the pandemic. So that's kind of the hole we have to climb out of.
Yeah, that's some great simple markers for us to be able to talk about. Yeah, I love it. Thanks.
Can you say those again? So total jobs, that's what you're the total amount of jobs, and what were the other two that you mentioned?
Average hours per week, and then average wages. So do you have a job? If so, how many hours are you working and what are they paying you? And the reason I like those is because all of those numbers come from the employer. They're not surveys of individuals, they're coming from employers. And they're coming from the data that they have to submit to the IRS for their taxes. So they're much more reliable data.
And just to thank you for that, by the way. And that's exactly the kind of stuff we want to put. And as we're doing our road shows and talking to everybody about things for the region, I want to make sure we have those numbers in our presentations. So thank you. And I'll share that with Lee as well. In response to the field trip on the Bourbon Trail, I vote yes. I would say let's start with the beeline, right? If we could, I'd be willing to kick in on cost and take people around to the different distilleries in Northern Kentucky, all the way down to Old Pogue and Maysville, and then hit some of our beeline bars, which is never a bad thing. So.
Yeah, that sounds
I'll add that to the mission statement for sure.
Maybe we can do our next committee meeting or end it anyway by going to one of those places. I think that'd be awesome.
All right, that's a deal. And I like now we have a designated driver. I like that even better. All right, great. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. We're a little bit over. I apologize, but great meeting, great comments. Thanks a lot for your participation. It means a big deal. And I guess at that point, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. So thank you, Tara. Thanks a lot. And we'll talk to you later. Bye.